You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. So my guest today is Amber Benziger, a licensed professional counselor and certified clinical trauma professional. Amber's private practice, Vitality Behavioral Health, is located in New Jersey. She is the founder of the Anxiety Lab, a group coaching membership site for women, and she is the co-host of the Managed Mind podcast. Amber and I discuss anxiety at length. She shares with me how it manifests for her, and more importantly, how she copes. We talk about the difference between a panic and an anxiety attack. We talk in depth about self-care and burnout and how to slowly incorporate new self-care practices into your busy life. And I'm going to offer a trigger warning here. We talk about suicide, suicidal thoughts, ruminating, and intrusive thoughts. This conversation is jam-packed with strategies and coping mechanisms to help with anxiety and, like I said, how to slowly incorporate self-care into your life. This was also a fun one, so I'm looking forward to hearing it. And here's Amber. Hey, Amber. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I am excited, even though I may not look it at the moment. Anyone listening, it's close to 8 o'clock at night. I'm fresh out of the shower, just like a hot mess tonight. But couldn't be more perfect, actually, that I'm sitting here with Amber because you focus on burnout, stress, anxiety, all of the things that have pretty much got me to this place that I'm sitting in right now.
Well, then it's perfect timing. I'm happy to be here. I'm also in my pajamas, so this is perfect.
I love it. So I'm going to preface this by saying I have therapy tomorrow, so do not feel the complete weight of what I'm about to say, but I just feel like I need to get it off my chest. I have 2 kids. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. My 3.5-year-old has been home from preschool for the last 3 days sick. We've been in the house, like, losing our minds. So today I take them to Target. I'm like, we just got to get out of the house. They need fall clothes. So, okay, they need fall clothes. We're there. We leave there. We see a Party City. I'm like, oh, they need Halloween costumes for school. Okay, let me go there. We come home. Oh, they need to eat. I guess we're going to feed them. I have an interview during the day with someone who focuses on intuitive eating, which is something that I'm trying to get involved in for myself. So, okay, reminder, I need to get involved in that, right?
Right.
Then I'm up with the kids. Oh, you know what? Husband's going to be home late tonight. Let me order food because I'm not going to have time to cook. Okay, let me order food. There's a delay. It doesn't come. I have to call him. Can you order the food? Jump on here. I get a sty. And let me shout. This is all the thing. This is just one day that I'm talking about. And it's there's actual responsibilities in there that are time sensitive and that are happening. And then there's all these other things on the brain that are just always cycling, like the fall clothes and the Halloween costume and the this and the that. This is burnout. This is stress. This is what is on the mental load of women everywhere.
Well, that's where I feel like I mean, as a mom of two, as you're saying that, I'm like, I didn't get the Halloween costumes. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute, what is the priority? And I think like that's where we have to stop and be like, is everything an emergency? Is everything on fire?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times women really want to, especially like take the reins and be in control and we like that, but then at what expense? I mean, like everything can't always be a priority. So really taking a step back and saying like, do I need to do this right now?
Hmm.
Or do I need to prioritize myself in that moment?
Yeah. Yeah. Because then I sit here and I'm with you and I'm reminded that I'm trying to build a business on about 3 productive hours a day.
Right.
Like, I'm getting over that. I'm getting like a little bit over that. I'm like, I need like 13 hours a day. I don't know. I know it was like a lot, but I just felt like it was on my brain, on my heart, and coming into this conversation, just wanting to almost give you a sense of where I and my listeners are coming from in the sense of burnout and stress. I mean, you're a mom, you get it, so
Yeah.
I already am comforted by that now. But it's I don't know, I don't know.
I mean, we are in this society where there is just so much pressure to constantly be okay and to keep going in like this hustle culture, right?
Yeah,
Of like having it all, and you see all of these Pinterest parents and Instagram lives, and I'm just like, is this is not real life, but like you get swept up in it, and the comparison is horrible, and then just feeling like, am I doing enough for these little ones? So really trying to give yourself grace and prioritize what's important. And sometimes I ask my kids, rightfully so, like, what do you need from me, or am I doing enough? And usually they're
mm,
like, yeah, you're fine.
yeah, yeah,
Their
yeah,
perception of that versus my perception is completely different.
yeah,
So, and that kind of puts me back into like, oh, okay, like I can, take a step back. I don't, like, again, like I said, everything isn't on fire. Everything isn't a priority right now.
yeah. I mean, I think that's probably my main issue is prioritizing, really, because in this time too, which what I'm about to say is such a good thing, but my little rinky dink 20 follower TikTok account got 100,000 views and like 5,000 followers not now, and then I'm like, oh my god, I have to create content. Oh my god, what do I do? Oh my god, like, anyway, anxiety. But anyway, all right. So Vitality Behavioral Health is your practice.
Yes.
I love this name. How did you come up with it?
So I was switching careers. Well, not really switching careers. I was switching jobs. I was working as a clinical director for a treatment center, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I was burnt out, and I wanted to go and find myself again and figure out where I want to do therapy and how I want to do it, and like bring the life back into it. And that's why I was like, oh, vitality. Like I want to bring the life back
Mm,
into myself and into other women and other people, through therapy.
I,
So yeah, that's kind of how I came up with it.
I like that. I like that. And why initially did you get into therapy or psychology, or what was your path there?
So I'd always been interested in like other people and how like the brain works and what people are thinking. And I had an aunt that was going to school for psychology, and I was like really young, and she was in her 20s, and she took me to one of her like psych classes. I was like this little kid. I don't know. I was like probably like 8 or
That's
something,
so
sitting in one
cool.
of these classes, and I was like, this is so cool. Like I love the professor. So like as I got older, I just started to get more and more interested in it. I thought I wanted to teach, but I was like, no, it's too many kids at once. Um, so it was like, oh, what's something else that I could do where I really felt like I was making a difference? And I kind of went back to psych and looked more into it and fell in love.
Awesome. Awesome. So, in your practice now, you mainly see women.
I would say that majority, like 98% of my practice is women. Yeah.
And what are they generally coming to you expressing concern or wanting to change, or what are they coming to you and what are they looking to get out of the experience?
I would say a majority of my clients have a lot of anxiety, a lot of overwhelm. My to-do list, I've been putting myself last too much. I'm burnt out. People keep telling me I need to do self-care. What the heck does that even mean?
Right.
Um, and so there's a lot of that, a lot of like, I don't even know where to start, but I don't like how life is going. So how can I change it?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's a really big one when it comes to my practice.
And where do you, someone who's never been to therapy or worked with a coach or something and has no idea what to expect, like, how do you start that process?
So I always say, most therapists give that free initial consult. Take them up on that. Ask
Mm.
all the questions. I love when people ask me a million questions. Like people ask, "Have I been to therapy before?" And I will be open about that. Yes, I still go now.
Mm-hmm.
What's a session like with you? What's a typical session like? Have you talked to somebody that has the same type of issues as I had before? Like, what do you see as like a positive outcome? Things like that. Ask the questions that you're concerned about. Like, tell them you're nervous, have them walk you through it so you can really be at ease. And then you're getting that conversational, piece. So you realize if you're going to flow and click with that person because every therapist isn't for you. So it's finding that person that you feel the most comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in some sense, being able to see yourself in that person a little bit, right? Like, I mean, not that we really know a lot about our therapists, but even I know for me, the first session or the first conversation, I started saying something about my kid, this and that, and immediately she was like, "Yeah, I have a son." So it was like, "Oh, okay, you got it, done." It feels a lot like we can get to the meat of things without me having to explain every circumstance and help someone who maybe doesn't have a kid or understand, or
Hmm.
even being male female, right? Like the experience of carrying a child, birthing a child, being a mother to a child is just something that for me, I get a lot out of the fact knowing that my therapist has shares that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think more and more therapists are being more like self-disclosing. Obviously, we're not, it's your session, so it's about you, but
Mm-hmm.
we're humans too. So it's nice to always know. Like I love that about my therapist as well. Like, she's a mom and she will humanize when I'm like, I'm feeling anxious about this because I have anxiety too. And she'll be like, "Ugh, I've had the same anxiety." So it's nice
Yes.
to know that like, oh, okay, this person's like not like a robot on the other side, like
Right.
this like super expert and knows everything, and I'm over here like falling apart. Like, no, they're human too that goes through tough times and goes through things, and we can relate.
Yeah. And I think that that's, in my experience, one of the biggest misunderstandings about the therapeutic relationship and about therapy as a whole. Just that you're going to walk into someone's office, lie down on the couch, and they're going to say, "How does that make you feel?" Like there's just this. If you don't have the experience, you just go off of what you see on television and in movies. Would you,
Ugh.
what are some of the other like misconceptions or stigmas that you think are around therapy and the experience of going?
Yeah, so I definitely think that people think a lot of the times we're just asking, how does that make you feel? People are afraid to talk about like certain things. Maybe if they're having like suicidal thoughts, they'll feel like, oh, they're going to be sent to the hospital. Like I feel like that's a big misconception.
Oh wow.
Um, that that someone will be like, you should do this. I think like that's the biggest thing because people are like,
Mm,
oh, you're a therapist. Tell me what to do. I'm
mm,
like, that's not my job. And you don't want that. You know yourself better. Our job is to help you get to where you want to go through guidance and through, listening and helping you to reflect and process. It's not telling like 'cause I have a friend that's like, I don't want to go to the therapist because she's gonna tell me to get a divorce. I'm like, well, that's a terrible therapist because no therapist should be like, you should get a divorce. She has no idea.
and she
So
says that
like,
to you.
yeah. Well, she's like asking the question, like, is that gonna happen?
Oh, I see.
No,
I see.
I hope not.
Right.
So I think like that's a misconception that we're gonna be like, this is definitely what you should do, and you're gonna be cured. Like, no, first of all, you're not broken. So
Mm,
yeah.
yeah, I definitely thought that's what it was. Like I thought that some like yeah, I was gonna go there and, or yeah, I guess now it's virtual, right? But I was gonna go to the office and she was gonna be like, "Here are the tools to your issue. Go forth," and
Right.
it's so not. So you brought up something that I have not discussed yet with anyone, and I'm curious, how do you handle someone expressing suicidal thoughts? What do you do in
Yeah.
that position?
So, I mean, we're going to ask more questions, right? Because a lot of people have those type of thoughts. There's a lot of, intrusive thoughts that we have that could be suicidal, or even, especially as a mom, it's like, oh, I'm going to drop my kid or something like that. You have that thought and you're like, oh, why did I have that? Like something's wrong with me. Like, no, intrusive thoughts are pretty normal. Suicidal thoughts, yes, if you have them, it's something you should definitely bring up to your therapist, because we should talk about like what's going on. But they're going to assess, like, is there a plan? Is there intent? Do you have
Mm.
these type of things in your house? Are there safety measures? Can you say that you're going to be safe tonight? So they're going to ask more questions, and if you can't, contract for safety and say that you will, you know, feel like you can continue to keep yourself safe, then yeah, that's something to talk about, maybe going to crisis or getting evaluated. But just because you're having this simple thought doesn't mean that, like, okay, we're going to send you away. And I think that's where people get scared, so they don't talk about it,
Mm.
which is detrimental.
Yeah. Now I'm just, of course, thinking of now, I'm asking you as the therapist, so how do you handle it? What would I do if someone came to me and said, I'm having suicidal thoughts?
I would definitely recommend seeing if they had a therapist,
Mm.
that they could talk to, or also there's tons of crisis lines that you can call. um, I think those are always helpful. And then if that person is, like saying like I can't keep myself safe, taking them to the hospital and sitting with them, and then someone will come out, and like a psychologist or psychiatrist, and they'll evaluate that person, and decide, if they need further treatment.
Mm. Okay. Just I only ask because for me, it's not something I've ever really thought about, and
Right.
if you get that call, you kind of want to know. I
What
don't
to
want to be
do.
caught off guard and be like, I want to know. Yeah, okay, all right. And in thinking about, I'm always very upfront on social media, particularly about the fact that I'm not a therapist and I interview therapists. But that doesn't stop people from coming to me and saying, I'm experiencing this, I'm experiencing that. And I always say, like, please seek professional help. In the
Mhm.
meantime, listen to the therapist on my show. And I always say, I'm not qualified, I'm not a professional, but that has, I have not experienced someone coming to me like, hey, I'm suicidal, but seeing what I've seen, especially on social media, it's not far fetched to me to think that at one
Mhm.
point it might happen.
Yeah. And I think that's real life, because there's a lot of people that maybe they don't have that network. So they are on social media and see that, like, oh, look at this person that's helped me. I need help. So like,
Yeah.
what should I do? And most therapists, including myself, like I have a disclaimer on my social media that has tons of hotlines that you can call, based, I haven't even broken down into country, because
Wow.
there's tons of people all over.
Yeah.
Because at first I just had the US, and I was like, oh, I guess I should really look into that,
Yeah.
to see like what other people can do. So yeah, there are those types of things. I mean, if you're really worried about that person, you can always call 911 and give that person's address. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Do you have people online asking you almost for therapy, like through DM or anything like that?
So I did, but I put up pretty good boundaries about that.
That's
Like,
good.
I'm
Yeah.
not going to answer any personalized questions. If someone asks me about my practice, I'll say, please email me at my practice email. Um, I have a membership service for women with anxiety called the Anxiety Lab, so I'll recommend people to go to that. Um,
That's
so
cool. What's that about?
yeah.
How does that
Yes.
work?
So it's not therapy. I'm always very quick to say that.
Okay.
But it is a community where women can come together. It's like a private group where they can ask, questions or share experiences that are going on. I bring in a workshop host, so a different therapist in my network every month that will talk about something, whether they're talking about like relationship anxiety, social anxiety, how to effectively communicate. And there's also a course. There's like a 12 step course in there that I've created to help people, change their anxious thoughts and kind of help with their overwhelm. So yeah, it's a whole little membership.
That's very cool. Is it, and you pay monthly or how to, yeah.
Yes, it's a monthly subscription. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And that's on your website.
Yes. There's a website. It's theanxietylab.com.
Okay, I will put that in the show notes.
Oh,
No, that sounds really cool. And it's online, I'm assuming, right? The group,
yes.
it's virtual.
Yeah, it's all virtual.
Okay, very cool, very cool. Um, you're very open about your handle is Amber versus anxiety, is right? Like,
Yeah, it's my everyday life.
yeah, like you're very open about that. How does anxiety manifest for you?
So I got my very first anxiety attack when I was in college, and I had a panic. Yeah, I had a panic attack, and I had no idea what was happening. And it kind of just spiraled from there, from this sense of overwhelm. I've always been like a very type A perfectionist type person.
Mm-hmm.
That I've been that way since childhood. I think that was like my safe space. Like if I could do well, if I could always have the A's and I didn't rock the boat, then like everything would be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I that has created anxiety. So something that I've really worked on. And I can tell for myself that like my anxiety usually manifests as like irritability. When I'm like super anxious, I'm like, get away from me, like not nice, like super irritable. So then it's like a red flag of like, okay, I need to take a step back and see like what's going on. But yeah.
So I have not had a panic attack. I have had what my therapist and I are calling an anxiety attack.
Yeah. There's definitely a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, there is. So, can you talk about the differences and how one feels versus the other? Because I personally struggle with all of this, like with anxiety attacks, depression. Like, I really have a hard time explaining how it feels and doing it justice for someone who doesn't have that frame of reference to understand what it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. So like a panic attack is usually very, very physical in nature. It's like it's when people are like, "Oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack," and they show up in the ER and it's like, "No," you know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's like that very visceral response. Where more of an anxiety attack is like that rumination, like where it's just like that thought that you
Yeah.
can't stop. Like say your boss comes and tells you at 12 o'clock, "Hey, I'm going to meet with you at 5 o'clock," gives you no information. So from 12 o'clock to 5 o'clock, you're like, I'm going to get fired. What's going on? I can't handle this. And you're just like sick about it. It's
Yeah.
going over and over again. Maybe you're feeling some of that physicalness, but it's very much that thought. But then when that thought can be alleviated, when your boss meets you at 5 o'clock and says, "You're doing great, you whatever," then
Mm.
that usually subsides. Where a panic attack is like very physical in nature. Sometimes you don't even know what brings it on, which there could be like no, apparent trigger. And it usually lasts for like a certain amount of time until it dissipates.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that was like the anxiety. The ruminating thoughts is
Mm-hmm.
really what what got me going. Like I just couldn't stop. I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like my I right before this took a shower to sort of like clear my mind a little and clean my face and all the things, but the shower is like very cleansing for me, literally and figuratively.
Yes.
And when I was started, I was like, you know what, let me get in the shower. That's like a safe space for me. And I was like the worst thing I could have done because I was just in there and I felt like the thoughts were just like bouncing between my brain and the shower door. Like it was insane. I've just never. And when I say that out loud, and I said that to my husband, and he's there, he's like, "What is going on?" I'm like, "There's thoughts like a tennis ball in my brain right now," and he's like, I just don't, But until you experience it, and I don't wish it upon anyone, but it's bizarre how out of control you feel in your own being.
Yeah. No, and I think you bring up a really good point because it is hard, especially with like partners or other people when you're trying to explain it. And if they're not a person that is anxious, it's like, well, what's going on
Yeah.
and how can they help you? And how do you even tell them in that moment how to help you? So I think like that's something I always talk with my clients about, like how to figure out how to communicate that with your partner and be really direct in like what you need. Like, I need space right now, or like maybe you're the person that needs to be hugged. I do not. Do not
Yeah,
touch
no,
me.
no, me either. Yeah, no.
And ask me if I need anything, and then listen to me once I come to you. Like, you know what I mean? So like I figured out like what works for me, and I think it's really important to start thinking about what works for you and in those moments. And when you're explaining it, explain it from like your point of view. Like when I feel anxious, like I can't stop thinking, it's ping ponging back in my head. So like that person really gets it from your perspective because they care about you. If you talk about it in a whole, like I have anxiety, well, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, no, I feel like this, like I can't breathe, everything's closing in. I always tell my husband, like, I feel like there's like a very large sumo wrestler sitting on my chest. Like that's what it feels like right now.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, okay, like you're feeling anxious. So like, like that's my thing. But he, like, to somebody else, it doesn't make sense. But like he gets that means, oh, she's, going through something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've heard some really on point descriptions, and that's a good one, the sumo wrestler one on your chest. That's really good because you get a visual with that,
Right.
and you get what you imagine the feeling to be. But I do find, and I say this again from my own experience, prior to really having an anxiety attack, prior to really ever feeling true anxiety, they're just words. It's really hard to put yourself in that position without the experience. And I'm harping on that a little bit because, now that I do know, the second someone says anything to me, even if it's not as great of a description as the one you just gave, it's like, okay, I want to be there. I want to help you. I want to whatever, and before that, you just don't understand. You don't know what you don't know,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't like to be touched either. Like once I'm past it, okay, maybe like a hug is nice, but in the middle of it, like, back up.
No. Yeah, definitely not.
So, what do you personally or with your clients, someone's feeling really anxious, what are some ways in the moment that they can work through it, take care of themselves?
So I'm always really big on like grounding techniques, especially when you're very, very anxious and you're feeling like that panic, because people are like, take a deep breath. No, you're going to hyperventilate if you're like starting to deep breathe because you're already so worked up. So a really like a quick one that you can do, especially if you're like out in public, is like clenching your fist and releasing. So you're starting to focus on that like tightness and release. And that brings your thoughts there instead of all the ruminating thoughts in your brain. There's always like the ice cube that people talk about where you can like hold the ice cube, because obviously you're holding something super cold in your hand. You're thinking about, this is really cold. And like, so it breaks up that thought cycle. So then you can start to process it like, this is just my anxiety. I think that's always an important part that I tell people. Like, your anxiety isn't a personality trait, right? It's not like I am my anxiety.
Yeah.
It's like, this is something that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
So separate it from you. Like, this is my anxiety talking. Like, is this true? Like, is this the end? Like, do I have to do this right now? Is this the end of the world if I don't do this? Like, whatever it is that's coming up for you, kind of question it, get curious about it. I always say like, that's the biggest thing when you're an anxious person, like to have that curiosity instead of like, oh my gosh, and believing it, because anxiety is really this thing that wants to keep us safe, right? Like that's why it tells us this thing. That's why it's like, oh my gosh, you're going to get fired. Don't go talk to the boss. When like, is that true? So like, it's not true, but it thinks like, oh, if I say this, it's going to keep you safe. So that's why it's really like questioning it and then like reframing it for yourself. Like, no, I know that I'm doing the best work that I can. And like, I haven't done anything. So I'm just going to have this conversation. So being able to start walking through that process, I think our innate reaction is to avoid it. Like, let me do something to distract myself. And then we never go back to it. And like, that works momentarily, but it usually just comes back, right? In other ways. Like, if I try to ignore my anxiety, it will usually lead to burnout, or it'll lead to like a migraine, because it'll come out in like this physical way because I'm trying to avoid it. So instead of avoiding it, it's really like moving through it, identifying that it's here, questioning whether this is real, and like reframing it for yourself. So walking through those steps.
Yeah. No, and I think you're touching on something that is hard in our culture, in our society, and it's to slow down and to really check in with yourself. I find that in now so many ways, it's like I can't go like 15 minutes without being like, okay, how am I feeling? What am I doing? Because it's either anxiety, the kids, I have to go to the bathroom, or like, what am I eating? Am I feeling good about what I'm eating? It's like a whole thing. Anyway.
But I feel like you learn that though in therapy. Like that's
Totally.
not like I feel like it should be more of like a normal thing to like check in with yourself. But I think like it does feel so strange. Like I feel like if you've never heard that before, I feel like the listener on the other end could be like, what is this woman talking about? Because
Yeah.
like, who stops and does that? But I think it's so important. Think about how many times a day we're checking in with our kids, we're checking in with our friend, we're checking in with our spouse. Why wouldn't we check in with ourselves to make sure like we have what we need? Like,
Mm.
because I literally have sticky notes like above my desk right here. Like, did you get water? Like, did you take a break today?
Yeah.
Because like I will just work with my head down,
Yeah.
until it's like, oh, my kids are home, then I'll do that stuff. And one thing led to another, and like, Amber, what did you do for Amber? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I was having a conversation earlier today and we were talking about the seasons of life and because I was sharing and I shared a little bit of this earlier, but this checking in with myself and the feeling of burnout, just the exhaustion and stress is a little bit, well, it's a little bit about this season of life. I have really small kids. I have two kids under 4, and there's a part of me that is here and is doing this show because I want myself and I want anyone listening who's me now or who's about to have been me, they're just having kids or whatever, to have a greater understanding and more kind of tools in their tool belt to get through this season of life. But there are days like today and moments like right before we got on this call where it feels like, you know what? I don't know if it's possible in this season of life to really, I don't even know. Like this season of life is very overwhelming. Like it's not, it's not leaving me a lot of time to take care of myself. I don't know. Some days I feel like that's an excuse, and other days I'm like, no, I really had no time. I don't know.
I think that's really real, and I'm glad that you're sharing that and being so open about it, because I feel like you see all of these like influencers and people online, and they're like, well, you just got to get up earlier, and it's like,
Yes.
I'm not a 5 a.m. club person, and if you are, that is great. I'm like jealous of you, but like I can't do that, so like I have to grab time where I can. And even if that's just like that once a week where I'm just like to my husband, like, I'm going to go for a long run on Wednesday evenings, like, that's what I'm going to do. And like, maybe that's all I can get. And that has to be okay, like you said, in that season of life, because I don't want to live so much by this like checklist. Like, I want to live and be in it, but I also need to take care of myself. So there has to be some type of balance, but we have to be realistic that we have responsibilities. And kids, honestly, at especially your age kids, like, they don't care if you if you need a break right now. Like, they need their peanut butter and jelly or whatever it is. So
That's what she eats
yes.
all day long.
So how do we find that time for ourselves? And I think we have to be realistic about that.
Yeah.
We can't just be like, get up earlier, or you're not trying hard enough. Like, no, it's hard.
Yeah.
It is really hard.
Yeah.
And you should meet yourself with compassion and grace, because it's difficult. So if you can find that, if you have your one sacred hour a week, like, hold on to that. Carve out whatever time that you can that's appropriate for you, and don't let anybody shame you for not, whatever, taking your magical 5 a.m. jaunt around.
I've the magical 5 a.m. jaunt around. I love that. Because a 5 a.m. whatever sounds miserable to me.
For sure.
Yeah. I've been saying I want to get up earlier, but, it's like always something. You can guarantee, you can take it to the bank. The day I say I'm going to get up earlier, that's the night nobody sleeps through the night. And I'm no.
My clothes are still in the bathroom that I was supposed to get up this morning and work out.
Yes.
Those clothes are still in there. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I missed it. And I just said, I did the best that I could.
Yeah.
And I will try again tomorrow and, give myself grace and move on, because I can't, like, things come up, and that's okay. We have to be able to shift and evolve.
Yeah. And you mentioned, earlier, and we've certainly been talking about it now, but this idea of self-care. And, I feel like, unfortunately, what started as this really great concept, the intention of this phrase has gotten so muddy and so frustrating, truly, because it's become about people trying to sell what they think should be everyone's self-care. And as you're talking, it's occurring to me that even this morning or right now, knowing that your clothes are still in the bathroom that you were going to get up and work out in, saying it's okay, like that's self-care.
Mm-hmm.
How else do you talk about how else do we self-care? How else do we take care of ourselves that's not a manicure pedicure? Because those are great,
Right.
but I don't have time for those either.
Right. And I always say that, like, I love a good spa day, but like
Yes.
I'm not getting that all the time. So
Nope.
like self-care is really about like what do you need that fulfills you, that brings you joy, that brings you that peace. So if my self-care is like I'm gonna sit on my couch and I'm gonna eat these barbecue chips at 10 o'clock at night and watch this Netflix show and no one's gonna talk to me, that was my self-care. You know what I mean? If it's like I need to go for a walk outside in the middle of the day for 5 minutes because I need to breathe. Like, what do I need? Because I always say, like, if you're doing it for other people, is it really self care then? Because it's not about you anymore. So,
Yeah.
like, what is it that you need? What works for you? And like incorporating it slowly. I think we self care shouldn't become like a super task that's like added to the to-do list, right? It should be
Mm,
like, oh, I'm looking forward to this, not just like, oh, let me check this off so I can say that I did something for me. Again, is that really fulfilling for yourself?
no.
So
It's not. No, it's not.
no.
So, okay. So in the okay, I'm gonna go for a walk or I'm gonna sit on my couch and eat barbecue chips, like talk to someone who's more talk to someone who's not making those things happen. How can they tangibly start to incorporate them? And you said start small, so what give us some steps. Like what does someone need to do within their household to start to implement this? I don't know. Like I'm just it's always how for me. Like that all sounds
Right.
great, but I need to
Hmm.
know how to do it.
So I always say like start with one thing, and I usually say like, are you a morning person or are you a night person?
Okay.
So I'm a night person. So for me, every night I try to do a very small nighttime routine, and I don't mean like this big thing. It's like literally wash your face, Amber. Like, can you do that? And I like do a brain dump in my journal because I have so many thoughts and ideas going through my head
Mm,
all day long, and they will keep me up. So I
mm,
will pull out my journal, and like I don't even know if it's legible because it's literally just like anything that's coming to my mind. I write it down for like a couple minutes and then I go to bed. And like that is I know it helps me wind down. It's part of my routine. It's for me. So like I put my kids to bed, they're in bed. I know my husband knows like, okay, she's writing in her journal. I'm not going to talk to her. Did you wash your face? Get out of bed and go wash your face. you know? Like so that's what I'm saying. Like start
yeah.
really, really small. If like for my one client, she was like, I'm going to take my makeup off every day this week. And I was like, you go, girl. And then she was like, I only did it 2 days. And I was like, those 2 days were amazing. Okay, maybe next time you'll do it 3. Like you have to slowly incorporate it. I feel like if you try to do all the things, you're nothing's gonna stick. So like, what's one thing that you really want to do? Do you like taking that 6 o'clock yoga class on Tuesdays and somebody can watch the kids for you? Then okay, maybe you can only do it every other week instead of every week. Like, what's actually realistic?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know?
I really really like the journal brain dump because I am fried, but my head hits that pillow and it's like, let's think of all the things. What didn't I
Yeah.
do today? What do I do tomorrow? I'm thinking of TikTok ideas. I'm thinking of podcast people I want to pitch. I'm thinking of all the things that while I'm running around with my kids, I'm really not able to focus on. So it's like that is one of the first and only times of the day when I get in bed that my brain is actually like quiet enough to go, okay, what do I want to think about? What do I want to do? What do I want to be? What do I desire? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, I love that. I need to just get it out. Just write it all down, get it all out, and then I can put my meditation and my things on and hopefully fall asleep.
Yeah, I mean that's what helps me because during the day I do this like visualizing thing, especially when I'm with my kids. Especially if there's like a bunch of anxious thoughts, I can't be like, to my kids like, hold on, I'm having all these anxious thoughts right now. Let me process them. They're gonna be like, what? Like,
Right.
get our snack.
Right.
So,
Right.
I like do this like visualization thing of like, there's this in DBT, it's called like leaf on a stream, and like you see like a leaf like flowing down a stream, and I kind of like put the thought onto it. So if it's like, yes, like I need to think of, you know, 4 more reels that I need to do and record, like I kind of put it on there. But then you're right, at the end of the night when I lay in bed, all those things that I was like, I'll put this to the side, they all come flooding back with even more things. So like
Hmm.
as I've been doing the brain dump, it's been helpful so that like I already know in my head, like, okay, I'll get to that, later. It's just kind of like the concept of like worry time. If I'm like
Mm.
every day I'm gonna set aside this 5 minutes to worry at whatever time it is. So then I know like, okay, I'll worry about that at the worry time. And then when worry time comes, it's like, was that actually a worry? So it becomes like less and less. You
Oh,
think it'll become
interesting.
like overwhelming, but it's really like your brain starts to realize like, was that actually a worry if I could wait till now? And it
Oh my
becomes less and
God.
less.
That's so good. I've never heard of that before. That's so good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Give
that's
it a
good.
try. I
I
mean, it
like
takes
that.
practice, but it's definitely something that works, especially like over time. At first, it's like, oh my goodness. And then you like, because you can write it out too, and you're writing out a bunch of stuff. But as the days go on, it becomes less and less because you start to realize, like, oh, this is like anxiety and not
Oh.
factual.
Oh.
Oh, that's fact. That's not a fact. That's just a thought.
Okay. So going back a second though, what you said, did you say DBT?
Yeah.
What's DBT?
Dialectical behavioral therapy. So it derives from, excuse me, I had to sneeze. I was trying to hold in my sneeze.
Let
That
it
would be
out.
sad.
Let it out. We'll edit it out.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay.
So it derives from DBT. And there's all these, it's very skills based. So there's a lot of skills training, and that one of the leaf on the stream is one of the skills that they teach there. It teaches like, it's very like emotionally regulating. So how to regulate your emotions so that they don't overcome you.
Interesting. I have to look into this too.
Okay.
Because I feel like CBT is the
Mm-hmm.
one that I see everywhere and I am familiar with, but I did not hear of DBT. Interesting. Okay. So so thinking about all this, how do you define burnout?
So burnout is where it's just this overwhelming amount of stress that kind of makes you feel like you can't do anything, where you're just like, I can't go on. I don't know how I'm going to do anything else. It kind of like um, debilitates you,
Mhm. Mhm.
where you feel like there's no out, there's no end.
Yeah. Mm. Do you I mean, I know I was going to say do you think it's preventable, but it is, right? We can stop before we get
Yes,
there.
we can. I mean, there are definitely a tons of signs that we can see that I think that we ignore, and that's why we get to burnout.
Mm.
But yeah, it is preventable. But I also think that there's a lot, like we as a society put pressure to be so like perfect, and like so like there are certain things like perfectionism and stuff that are applauded, like overworking yourself and overstressing yourself. So that doesn't help because it's not like people are like, no, you're doing too much. People are like, wow, look at all you're doing, so you keep doing it,
Yeah.
which leads to that burnout culture. And I think, caregiver burnout is a big one, like having kids or taking care of like an elderly person or whatever it is. Like, people are applauding you, but are there a lot of people stepping in to like help you?
Mhm.
Let me take
Mhm.
a shift, or let me babysit for you. So yeah, a lot of that stuff is hard to notice because people are saying like, oh, that's good, or you're doing a great job as you burn yourself out.
You say that so casually.
I
and no
mean, it's true.
and no one can see you, but just your expression was like as you burn yourself out. Just simply put, you are a flame that is just burning out.
I mean, because I feel like I see it all the time, and it's
Yeah.
so sad, but
Yeah.
it's so true that, and like, when are we gonna start? I'm glad we're having this conversation. I want us to talk about it more. I think people are afraid to talk about it more, afraid to say like, I'm struggling, I need help, and then we're like chastising them when they are like laying on the ground and can't get up because, they're so burnt out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I remember it was before I got married. It was a year before I got married. I was going to this workout studio, and this woman who taught the class she was like super in shape. She had the Apple Watch. And this was like right when they were coming out, and she had the Apple Watch, and she was always seemed like she just had like a fast pace about her. She talked fast. She walked fast. She just did all the things fast. And she had this like big Explorer. There were like 4 car seats in it. She was always like shuffling things around. And I remember so naively like looking at her and being like, yeah, that's the mom I'm going to be. I'm going to have the Apple Watch. I'm going to teach fitness classes. I'm going to shovel these kids around, and I'm going to get it all done and be Superwoman. And then, like, you become that to some extent, and you're like, being Superwoman sucks. Like, I don't want to be Superwoman anymore.
Because it's not realistic.
Yes.
It's not sustainable either. Like,
No.
okay, like you do get there, and then it's like, oh, that's why people are like, how do you do it all, Amber? I don't. I'm very clear. I don't.
Okay.
If it looks like it, I'm sorry that I made it look like it, because I don't.
I actually had that up here on my notes. I'm like, okay, you're a mom of 2. You work full time. Like, how do you get it all done?
I don't.
And you don't. Yeah.
Something always falls to the wayside, and that's like I said, everything can't be the priority. And there are things that I will definitely obviously commit to and I will follow through, but sometimes I just can't do it, and that's okay. And I have help. I have a really great husband, and we have family around. Like, I'm really open about that. And sometimes I'm just like, I can't do this, and I'm gonna take a moment to not.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's real life.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any advice or even from your own experience, you said it casually earlier, but when you were talking about your brain dump and you were like, my husband just knows, oh, she's doing her journal, I'm not going to talk to her. Like, that's a routine now that you have. But for those of us maybe who don't quite have those routines yet, how do we bridge that gap with the people around us in our house? How do we communicate nicely but effectively? Like, I could just... I don't know, because I want to be like, my instinct is always, listen, I'm in my journal, don't bother me, but like, that's not gonna really be very nice, like that's like, my mom always says, that's inside voice, like, talk to me about how we do outside voice a little bit with the people around us who maybe aren't feeling as much weight on their shoulders and don't really understand the mental load, and we need to communicate.
Yeah, I think it's definitely figuring out for yourself, like, okay, what am I going to try to implement? And then sharing that, being like, yeah, there at this point, I don't remember the conversation, but I'm sure there was of, hey, I'm going to start doing this journaling at night because I'm having trouble sleeping, and I'm going to try this. So I really need like my space to do that. So when I go upstairs and if I'm writing, like, can you not talk to me? Because then I'll get distracted and that will just be bad. You know what I mean? So like, whatever it is in that dynamic, kind of sharing it and like why you're doing it, especially for someone that cares about you or in your relationship with whatever, they want to know, they want to help you. So like, this is how you can help each other. And I always think it's really great to just do check-ins with your partner. Like, hey, what's going on with you? Do you need anything from me? Is anything coming up for you? Like, we try to do that at least like once a week to check in, because I feel like we're all busy. Our kids are 5 and 8, and they already have a lot of activities.
Oh my God. I know. My niece is 6 and she's the same. Like, I can't even imagine having 2 of them at that age. Yeah.
What? Why are you so social? But but I mean, obviously they're socially distanced. We're doing it reasonably, but still there's like, there's just so much. So it's like, sometimes I feel like we're like 2 ships crossing the night. So we try to really say like, okay, let's sit down and figure out like, hey, is everything good with you? Is everything, good with you? Do you need anything? What's going on? What's coming up? So that we continue to have that line of communication open, because it is important. Especially, my husband is the most chill person and I am the most unchill person. So regulation.
They usually find each other, those types,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So like, it's usually like, so what do you got going on, Amber? Because I always have a ton of ideas. And he'll tell me if they're actually obtainable. So, but having that conversation and knowing that I can go to him, yeah, it's definitely helpful. So I would definitely say go to that person in that state where you're thinking about doing it, not where you're in the state of like, I'm super overwhelmed and super anxious.
Yeah, like
Because then you're
where
not
you're
effectively
past the point.
communicating.
It's like you're at desperation. It's gonna come
Right.
out like, listen, I'm journaling. Bah!
Exactly.
We're getting a little peek behind the curtain here at where I'm at. But, you know, and I'm going to ask this, and I'm going to preface it by saying, speaking, you know, heteronormatively, like in the dynamic that we're talking about here, I personally am sometimes a little bit afraid to ask my husband what he might need from me, or how's he doing, or this and that, because if he does come back with something, and this is where the heteronormative part comes in, normally he doesn't, right? Like normally he's like pretty good, pretty chill, no big. He's got dinner, he's got his kids, he's got TV, like he's fine. But I'm always like fearful that maybe he has something, and I'm like, I want to ask because I want to be there for you, but oh my God, please don't have anything, because like I just don't feel like I have any more bandwidth to accommodate or to give or to whatever. I don't know.
I think that's honest though. Like I feel like that's an honest part of conversation and setting that boundary too. Like I always say, like you know, capacity over capability. Just because we're capable of being and doing all the things doesn't mean we have the capacity to. And that's just gonna shift sometimes, you know, like sometimes this is gonna weigh more on you than it is on him, and him on you. So like saying that, like, I really want to support you, but I don't know if I can pick up that extra slack right now, if I can do that right now. Like, can you help me out? Like, and then, you know, hopefully I'll be in a better place at this point. But if we're not communicating that, then all of it does is build resentment and the unknown, and the other partners making assumptions, and none of those things are good.
Yeah.
So it's like being open to communicate and saying that, like, I want to know what's going on with you. I want to support you. I just don't know if I can do that right now, but maybe I can do this, you know, or maybe we can try this. So coming up with something together.
Yeah.
But if we avoid the conversation, then we don't get anywhere. We don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
You're like, I don't know.
I
don't know about that.
I'm like, no, because you're right. You know, but I also unfortunately do the thing where I'm like, I assume he's gonna just say, no, I'm fine. And in our dynamic, I absolutely know there have been times where he says he's fine because he knows I'm kind of underwater. And I don't like that feeling either, you know? Like, I'm like, no, I want to have my act together so that when he does need me, I can be supportive. But it is really what you're saying. Like, sometimes I've certainly, now that I'm saying it out loud, I've certainly done that in reverse too.
And that's a relationship. Like, it is those checks and balances. If it's always lopsided, then yeah, we're going to have an issue. But like, that's what you're there for, to support each other in those times. And it's going to balance out. But if we don't communicate, then we're never going to know when we need to shift a little.
I'll say this because he tends to listen, but I'm in therapy. My husband's not. But what I always find really refreshing is when I bring something to him and say, I'd like to try this. Like, he's always game, you know?
Yeah.
There's never that sounds stupid, you know? It's like, okay, let's try it. You know what I mean? Right. And what's really empowering, I guess, about being the one in therapy and doing the work, at first I saw it as a burden. I was like, what the heck am I doing all this for? You sitting on the couch, you know? And now I'm like, you know, because just how I react now or respond or think about things changes so much between two people, and the other person doesn't even realize what's happening.
Right.
You know, it's very cool, actually. It's like, I feel like our little tiffs and things, just part of the normal, like, every day or every whatever, you know, dynamic of husband and wife. And, you know, like, instead of being like, ugh, I have to do the dishes again, or like, ugh, could you just do the dishes? Like, that's obnoxious. And like, that's how I might have said it before. And now it's more, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'd appreciate it if this, that, and the other. And it's like, okay, right. You know, and like that's just something small, but those small change it for your whole household.
Right.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Oh
No, I
my God.
completely agree. I think, yeah, because if you're changing the way you're showing up, that's going to make other people show up differently.
Yeah.
It's going to make it a more calmer, whatever environment that you're giving off. So that makes complete sense.
Yeah. Has anything about, working with your clients or even your own experience with therapy, has anything surprised you?
I mean, I've been doing this for a while, so I don't really get super surprised
Yeah.
anymore. But I will say that there are times where I'm just like, this is really cool. Like, that's really cool when people come to this realization, or even for myself, I'm a therapist. And so sometimes, like, I think when we go to therapy, we're like, oh, we know everything. Like, that's not true. And like, my therapist will say something, I'll be like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, and I'm just like, that's so cool, because we're two different people and we have these different perspectives. And so I like that, those like aha moments.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see, but it's also really cool to experience too on the other side of the couch.
Yeah. And I wonder, it's, having that experience with your therapist of going, oh, I didn't know that. Do you also have that experience with your clients? Like almost you're learning from them?
Absolutely. Because like I said, like, yourself the best. So when they say something, I'm like, yeah, like, I didn't even think about that. Like, maybe that is that perspective. Maybe that is why you're doing that. Like, that's a really great thing to say. So, and it's cool to see them doing that, because it's like, oh, they're thinking differently and they're processing differently. So yeah, I feel like we can always learn from anyone as long as we're open and willing to.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. I really like therapy.
Me too. I mean, that's what people are always like, I don't know, like, I don't really have anything to talk about. And I'm like, you're going and somebody is talking about you and you only. This is about you for an hour, especially as a mom.
Yeah.
An hour about me?
Yeah. No.
Okay. Yeah. Sign me up.
Yep. Totally.
Like, I feel like that's self-care for me. Like, I'm going to make time to go and see my therapist. Well, now I see her online, but and talk to her, because it's that time is for me to get out whatever I need to process and talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially over the course of quarantine, like, she was one of the only adults that I spoke to outside of my husband. And, especially when he was home, I could actually take the calls alone. And that was a part of me is so thankful that we've continued to have our sessions over FaceTime, because it's just logistically so easy. But there is a huge other part of me that really misses the in-person, because I had to get childcare. It was like, and it was my dad, which was great, but I've gotten used to it, but there was a difference between me sitting on FaceTime and my kids in front of the TV and them occasionally interrupting or, smacking each other around, and I got to stop, and versus like going to her very quiet aromatherapy smelling office and getting a coffee on the way in and just, oh, isn't this lovely? I miss that a bit. I do. I'm so thankful, like I said, to still be able to go, especially during that time where we couldn't go anywhere, and to have that outlet. But God, that was a break. That was nice. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't think about it like that. From the therapist side, like, I miss seeing my clients in person and just like having that. And like, now I have like clients that I have never even seen in real life. Like, that's so weird to me.
Yeah, that is
like
weird.
I was thinking about that. Like, I've been seeing you for like a year. I don't know how tall you are. Like, so like for me on that side, but like just thinking about that person like coming in for that routine and it being part of their self-care. Like, I didn't think about that.
I don't know how tall you are.
I mean, those are the things that pop in my head. Like, I can't help it.
Anytime too. It reminds me, anytime I'm like talking about my weight or my body image or this or that, and she's always like, I mean, you look great. Like, you find, I'm like, angles. I can hold the phone at an angle. Like, because the last time she saw me, I was very pregnant. And so it's like so funny, right? Like I'm like, no, there's angles and you only see from like my collarbone up, and
Right.
it's just like, yeah, it's just different. Anyway, Amber, is there anything that you would have asked yourself that I didn't think to, or anything you want to leave people with?
I think I just want to leave people with just, start to get curious. If you feel like you're an anxious person, really start asking yourself, like, where is this coming from? What's going on? Is this my anxiety? And starting to separate that. And please, please, please give yourself so much self-compassion. I think one thing that I always like to do, because I can be very hard on myself, like I said, I'm type A person, is at the end of every day, like, what's one thing I can forgive myself for? Did I yell at my kid today because I was stressed out about something? You know what? I'm going to forgive myself for that, and do better tomorrow. And that's been a practice that I really love. And I always try to give out as advice, because I think it's been really helpful. And I know as women, we kind of hold on to things and can really chastise ourselves. And there's enough of that from everybody else.
Yeah.
So be kind to yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Well, Amber, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate your insight and your willingness to sort of be my sounding board this evening. It was so nice to talk to you.
Yes, I had such a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
We had such a good time, and I just love that because we covered some really heavy topics. Definitely all important topics that are worth taking seriously, but it is nice to lighten up the energy every now and then. And I have to thank Amber for essentially being my therapist that night and letting me vent after a tough day. It was truly so well timed, and I believe meant to be, that I connected with her that night. That being said, I've come a long way since this conversation, and I'm certainly grateful for the tips, tricks, and advice Amber shared with me. I absolutely love the brain dump suggestion. That's really helped me. I've also explored the concept of capacity over capability and really slowing down to assess that for myself. I've learned to better reframe my thoughts and have eased up on myself in terms of having more realistic expectations around self-care. Amber, you are a wealth of knowledge, and you did exactly what I want my guests to do. You came on here and you gave us the how. You gave us action items on how to cope and get stuff done. So thank you again. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.